In a world where human trafficking persists as a grave injustice, there shines a beacon of hope, a force for change. Eden is on a mission to amplify the voices that matter most, the voices of those leading the charge against trafficking. Join us as we dive deep into the lives and struggles of inspiring leaders from anti-trafficking organizations around the world. You'll hear their stories, their battles, and their unwavering determination to bring light into the darkest corners. This is Eden.
Well, I mean, there's so much that you went through there. The information that you went through is mind blowing to me. I wanted to ask, what is you talked about the things that the girl or the victims, that their vulnerabilities,
Let's call
right?
them survivors.
The
They
sur-
like that.
okay, survivors. I'm sorry.
I'm not one of those language
Right.
dictators.
Right.
You speak how you want to speak,
Right. No,
but
no, I
they ask.
100%. Yes. No. I love it.
I mean,
Thank you.
I don't cater to all of the requests
Right.
because some of them I think are just like
Yeah.
that's how I talk. Don't tell
Right.
me how to talk. Don't
Right.
censor me.
Right.
But I like survivor
Yeah.
because they are.
Yes.
If they're
For
still
sure.
breathing,
Yes.
they're a survivor. Um, So I guess one of the reasons this is important to me, there's a couple things going on in this country right now that I think people need to be aware of if they're interested in this topic. Now I know this topic isn't for everybody. So, but if someone's
It should
listening to your
be. But
podcast, I
yeah.
would tell them, keep an eye out. So one of the things we did in Ohio, I served on the Attorney General's Human Trafficking Commission, is we have a lot of really well-meaning folks coming into the issue, and they come very naively, and a lot of them are out of the church or out of the faith body, and they'll come, let's just say, for example, they'll come to Dayton and they're like, oh, I just learned about human trafficking, Tonya just trained us, I'm going to start an organization about it. Okay, one of the first things that you can do for your community is not dilute its resources. Do what I call an environmental scan. What organizations are already doing this work or something similar?
Right.
Can I come in behind them and support them?
Right.
Kind of like you all did, right?
Yeah.
Technically, you
Yes.
could have set up a house, started your own program. But the reality is, we don't lack resources
Right.
in Ohio and in many parts of the country. California is leading in resources. But when people first come to the issue, they have such a fire, right? I'm going to rescue people. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, that they don't even stop to say, how can I best utilize what I'm doing? So that's first off. Second off, they're hurting survivors horribly. We see the aftermath because when they come to us, we have organizations in our state that are faith-based, say they're faith-based, who exploit survivors for money. I mean, they say, so what we did in Ohio with the AG's task force is we set up state standards. They're so good, Homeland Security would like all 50 states to adopt them.
Wow.
So if you come in contact with survivors in any way, you have to meet the minimum criteria to be on the approved matrix list. Now, I'm a small government kind of person, but we really needed this because we would have people just who knew nothing, just nothing.
Right.
I had a woman give cash money to an addict because the addict, because it is human nature
Yes.
to meet a survivor and want to put them on a pedestal.
Right.
That's the worst thing you can do to a survivor.
Right.
The worst thing.
Right.
I don't care if they're 30 years out. That is not healthy for them.
Right.
And giving them everything they want and treating them. So we have survivor informed care.
Okay.
We ask them to come to the table, but we don't believe they're the expert in the room.
Right.
They often do, right? And they are an expert on what happened to them.
Right.
But this underground kind of, it shifts and moves with technology. It shifts and moves with information. Trafficking 5 years ago looked a lot different than it looks right now.
Yeah.
So if they were trafficked 10, 15 years ago, they can tell, we don't just have women tell their story.
Right.
We don't do that. If you can't hear the information and be moved by the facts and be moved by the presentation, she's not a dog and pony show for you to, hear the nitty gritty. That's ridiculous.
Right.
But there's a lot of faith-based organizations, even in our community, who, a woman that was on the street, Because what often happens is they'll start in that middle class, say, we were
Yeah.
talking about that earlier, how
Right.
brothers and stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
then what happens is many traffickers in our country are very socially linked,
Yeah.
unlike drug traffickers who kill each other, right?
Right.
These guys will often call, say I got Rachel. I interviewed a multi-million-dollar brothel owner named John Pace in Ohio. Okay. And his girls made average 3 and higher per hour in his brothels. He
Okay.
was a Fortune 500 company owner. It went bankrupt. He found God, wrote 2 books. I'm sorry, he opened brothels, then found God, then wrote 2 books about how to run those brothels.
Wow.
Anyway, so
Interesting.
if John's got Rachel, he had a book that they had to follow, like how they had to wash and shave, and they could smoke marijuana and drink alcohol, but they couldn't do anything harder.
Yeah.
Okay. They lived in his mansions, the mansions he bought when his company was running. So he say he's got a girl named Rachel, and Rachel, they move on to something harder eventually
Right.
because that's how they deal with the trauma. They
Right.
have to self-medicate.
Right.
The brain will not, after so many times, the brain's just not going to function. They have to self-medicate.
Right.
Or let's just say she ages. He
Yeah.
can't get what he's used to getting. He doesn't just let her go. He goes to networking events. They have networking events across the country, and they network socially, and it's a whole big thing. In my presentation, I go in detail. But so he's going to call Richard in Nevada and say, "Hey, Richard, got Rachel here. This is what she makes in per date, but she's got a little meth problem now. You could probably get this. You want to buy her?" Richard's like, "Hey, yeah, man, I'll take her." So
Yeah.
money changes
Slavery.
hands, Venmo, whatever.
Yeah.
He goes to Rachel. Rachel thinks she's there of her own free will. She can leave anytime she wants because of the lexicon, right?
Right.
He's like, "Rachel, do you trust me?" "Yes. Yes, John, I do. I've never even had sex with this man. He's not a pimp. He's never beat me. He's good to me, right?"
Yeah.
He didn't beat her because he needs her to make money.
Right.
So he's like, "Your future's in Nevada. You trust me, right?" "Yes, John, I trust you. Your future's in Nevada. I got a guy out there. You're going to be rich." So when you sit down next to Rachel on the Greyhound bus, now I know you hear, "Oh, they fly there, girls." This is a business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
High profit, low risk.
Yeah.
That's what they filter all their decisions through. Do some fly? Yes.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing
Right.
because you got to have an ID, you got to go through security, all the things for flying.
Yeah.
A Greyhound bus, you get on that Greyhound. So when you sit down next to her, Rachel's going to tell you, how it's her idea that she's going to go out to Nevada and that's her future.
Yeah.
And she's got no idea money's changed hands. She doesn't know that. She thinks she's choosing up,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it's important to understand that just little bits of information like that. I can work with a survivor. Like I was in a meeting the other day and a survivor, because we always like to have them there.
Right.
We need their voice. And but we make sure they've had their trauma. And in Ohio, we have criteria before they can even speak. Before you can pay them to speak, they need to have a certain amount of healing.
Right.
These new organizations, churches and stuff, they're like, "Can you bring a survivor? It's not a dog and pony show, people."
Right.
No,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
Let's get you sensitized to the issue first. How about that?
Yeah. Word.
So it's really important. So when a survivor comes, this guy I was telling you about, the pimp.
Yeah.
First of all, he said he wasn't a pimp. He was a service provider. So he called me and said, "I want to speak for your organization. I'm redeemed with the blood of the Lamb. I ran these high-end brothels. I can give information. I can train. I can talk to people." He thought he's like, "I can bring my lived experience." My only question to him was, "Okay, John, you've told me," and I interviewed him for many hours. "You told me in an interview that you had high-level politicians from our state and from the federal government come to your brothels." He said, "That's right, I did." I said, "You can come work for my organization when you give their names to law enforcement."
Wow.
You know what he said? "I would never do that."
Yeah.
I said, "Then don't talk to me about the blood of the Lamb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't talk to me about that."
Like fake honor. Like, oh, that's
Yeah,
you know,
like so
yeah.
so a lot of times survivors will come to the table and they'll
Wow.
say, "I have lived experience." That doesn't mean that you're a public speaker. It doesn't mean that you are versed on how things are running today in this community. It's important to have survivors at the table. It's important to have trauma-informed care, but you got to be very, very careful not to base everything on their one experience,
Right.
because I've worked with so many survivors and their experiences, the high level, the middle class, and the lower. So Rachel, back out there in Nevada, she's going to be sold down the socioeconomic ladder until in this country, by the time she's on the street in Ohio, if she's on the street, most of the time she's out there selling herself for
Yeah.
drugs.
Yeah.
And that's what the public sees.
Yeah. Wow.
And they think, I was one of those people. I drove my son. My son wasn't doing his homework, my oldest one. And he was listening to music I didn't like. And he was just punking out on me, my
Right.
sweet little baby. I put him in my SUV in the suburbs. This was before I got into this. This is how God works, right?
Yeah.
I drove him to downtown Dayton. And I said, where the houses are abandoned. And I said, do you want a house like that? You want to live like that person right there? Because they were obviously high.
Right.
I said, do you want to marry someone like that? And I pointed to a woman who was working the street.
Yeah.
I said, this is your life if you want to keep messing around and not doing school. Not even a year later, guess what God had me doing?
That.
Down there on those streets, asking those women, can I pray with you? Can I help you?
Yeah.
Can I get you some resources?
Wow.
Tell me that's not.
Yeah, that's good.
And that, I deserved it. I
Yeah.
deserved it because I came to the issue thinking, this is United States of America. I can understand it in the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was emancipated. Everything I owned fit in a tiny duffel bag. And
Yeah.
I made it. I can make it. Anybody can make it.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody can do that, right?
Right.
Not everybody's the same.
Right.
So God gave me grace for the women in the Philippines. And then those words come out of my mouth to my son. And not even 12 months later, I mean, I was still
There.
bald from chemo. He was
Wow.
acting up, and I'm
Wow.
pointing out, because I thought if I don't make it, I gotta at least tell him where he's headed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. The story, the beginning, like just, this is something that we're a theme that I'm trying to, I think, for our audience to hear that, like your story, that you come from like an emancipated child moving out on their own, go out in the Philippines. I mean, in most cases, you'd probably, I mean, I don't think you would have gone down like selling yourself, but you've just been like, okay,
Right.
I'm gonna party, I'm gonna just not care, and
Oh, it could very easily. When I lived in the group home, I lived with girls who weren't breaking laws, but they came from places like one girl was locked in those little metal RVs. I forget what you call them. They don't even have a bathroom, but it's just like
yeah,
she was padlocked in one. And when they found her, she was almost dead.
wow,
There was no food, So
yeah,
they came from that, and they all could have been easily.
yeah,
All it would have taken was a man with a nice car,
right.
and
And
they would have done whatever.
you came from that, from a situation where that could have easily been you, and where you're at now and what you're doing now. And I also love the fact you talked about earlier that you were in like survival mode when you were
Hmm.
fighting, like literally survival mode, because you were fighting cancer, right? And um,
Right.
uh, something that in the context of survival, it like love is almost can't exist because you're always just trying to live. You're just trying to make it each
Right.
day, each and every day. And the
Right.
fact that and that you even got to the point where you're just like, I am, when you were, thank God that you were good, you got through it, but you're like, I'm done being like that. I need to do something that where I can expand my love, that I can and show and give,
Right.
rather than feel like I'm just trying to breathe, help other people
Right.
breathe. It was so good. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And God is faithful. So
Amen.
when my husband would deploy and stuff, I always worked. Before I was emancipated, I had a paper route. I had 2 jobs. I always worked.
Right.
So when my husband started deploying to war and I had kids, I thought, I was on phone with my first son, on the phone with my job, going, I'll be right back. I'm putting him in daycare.
Yeah.
I didn't think I had a maternal instinct. And as soon as he was born and I saw his face, I called him and said, I quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody else is raising this baby. Now, I'm not judging women who put their kids in, but I
Right.
was in cities where I didn't know anybody. I
Right.
had no family. I'd done reports, investigative journalism on daycares. I knew about hawks and doves, and I didn't want I thought, why am I having kids I'm not going to raise?
Right.
It's
Right.
just it's a season.
Yeah.
I'm only going to have one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just a season till he gets to an age where he can tell me if people are abusing him. And then
Yeah.
I had another one in Alaska because, Lord, there's nothing else to do up there. So I'm telling you, people are like, I saved my whole life. I'm like, take the cruise. Everything beautiful about Alaska you can see from the water. I was in the interior. It was,
Yeah.
whew, it was tough. It was tough. But
Yeah.
and I had a preemie 2 months early in
Oh, wow.
February in
Wow.
total darkness. It
Wow.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, at an army base, and whew, he was born breathing. It was a whole thing.
Wow.
So, but yeah, so I had my boys, and I just wanted them to be aware that, because my background, that woman on the street, those abandoned houses, that's how my mom's side of the my mom and all her children, that's how they lived.
Right.
And I thought, if it's in their blood, I want them to know that's where you're headed. Like,
Right.
this is in your blood.
Right.
You got to fight not to be that way.
Right.
It's easy to do the easy thing, to be lazy, all the things.
Right.
So then I said that to them, and a year later, God said it to me.
Yeah.
But I had went through a long growing period, like a decade, where we were just moving all the time. My husband was deployed multiple times, gone for a year, gone for 7 months, and I was a single parent in a place where I couldn't call somebody to give me a break.
Right.
And so I got really close with the Lord, and I got up every morning at 5 a.m. and I studied my scriptures, and I learned to play guitar. I can't play any songs, but I
Mhm.
wrote a bunch of them.
Oh, awesome.
Not good.
Yeah. No,
They're not good. But I
no, that's
did,
good.
because I just felt like after I did my Bible, and I studied, I was learning some Hebrew and a little Latin, and the whole
Yeah.
thing. So then when he sent me to Alaska, I got really mad at him because he put me out in the wilderness for 3 years by myself.
Yeah.
My husband was gone a lot. It's dark 3 months a year. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a preemie. Kids were getting sick with the super flu because it was just awful.
Yeah. Wow.
And when I left there, I was like, not only did you put me in the wilderness, you didn't give me a body. I was totally blaming him.
Yeah.
The only chapel, I had issues with the chapel. It was very works based, and I knew my scriptures, so I would leave steam coming out of my ears because I'm like, how can you be a pastor and be preaching?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just was
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
a good thing. So
I know people
for
like that. Yeah.
many, and then I could never find a church. I would find a church when we got to Ohio. I would go to a church, and the preaching would be rock solid, like I'm talking R.C. Sproul.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just rock, but the worship was dead,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the worship was banging
Yeah.
and the message was dead.
Yeah. Wow.
So I really struggled. And now looking back, I think he had that season for me because I was bitter,
Yeah.
and it left room for this human trafficking,
Yes.
because I would have been so involved, because I always would get really involved.
Right.
And, just when you love the Lord, you love to be around people who love the Lord and you talk to them. And this would never have happened if I wouldn't have gone through that season.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But then cancer real quick, I'm like,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I know I've been mad at you, but can we talk? And then I started on the journey, and I did that with my son. A year later, I was like, because when I first got the answer, I don't know how you are, but when I first got the answer, I was like, no,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I fought and scraped to get out of that, to get away from that.
Yeah.
And you're going to send me down to it? No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no. But he
Yeah.
did. And my personality, which has, like I said, the sheriff jokingly would say that has gotten me, in a little bit of trouble through
Right.
my life, especially in the military. And and it works perfect on the street.
Right. Yeah.
And it works perfect with the women that I serve.
Nice.
They never say I'm fake. They never, when I say, so we're faith-based, but we don't shove it down their throats. So
Right.
if a
Right.
woman comes, we just had a woman graduate. She wanted nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
Nothing. Now
Yeah.
they can't practice witchcraft or anything
Right. Right.
like that,
Right.
but they can be atheists. They can be
Right.
agnostic. They
Right.
don't have to participate in the faith-based programming because we have alternatives. If they say, then that's because some of the women who come to us were abused in church,
Yeah.
and they can't even. That we had a woman with us that when you said Jesus, she started shaking and sweating.
Wow. Yeah.
Like she just got, you couldn't, when she left us though, she would say, please pray for me. She still wasn't there,
Right.
but she would say, and she still reaches out and says, I've got this big interview coming up. Please pray for me.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so good. That is so good. I love there's so much that you've talked about, and I feel like a lot of what I love too is you've dispelled a lot of myths, I think, in everything that you've talked about. Because I feel like I run into a lot of times when we talk about human trafficking, there's so much for us and even our organization to learn about.
Hmm.
We got really when we went to Thailand, we learned a lot about what was happening in Thailand, but we also knew that what was happening here was very different than what's happening in Thailand.
Yes.
And so this has been awesome. But one of the myths that I hear a lot, or especially being out here, being close to San Diego or being close to the border, um, you hear people like, or they think of the movie Taken or whatever, and they think that,
Yeah. The
that's what,
stranger danger.
yes. And then they're getting kidnapped and they're getting pulled across the border. How much of that is like, I mean, I'm sure
None
it
of it.
happens. I'm sure it
No.
happens.
So your listeners don't even have to take my word for it. They can look it up. The FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, every year the FBI puts out data on exactly. So this is why people get confused. They hear missing children.
Right. Yes.
So about 91 to 95% of missing children in our country are actually runaways. Now we know runaways are, and that stat of a runaway will be approached within. So if you go to a human trafficking training and they start giving you hard data, first off, be skeptical because there's just not that much really good hard data out
Okay.
there. And second, this is a big tell. This is how you know someone got online, read a bunch of stuff, and now they think they're an expert, and they're going to tell you what they read.
Okay.
A runaway will be approached in 48 hours of running away, blah blah, and well, why that's wrong for most of the country or some of the country, I know it's wrong in Ohio,
Yeah.
is because that study came out of a runaway shelter in California.
Yeah. Wow.
Then because they asked the kids, and 1 out of 3 were. So,
Yeah.
okay, so it was true for that, maybe even for California, but you can't extrapolate that across the rest of the country.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
That's not good research methodology.
Right.
So you have people who don't know anything about research methodology trying to they'll read a study and they'll think, "Oh, yeah," and they'll start or most of them, I'll just be honest, people don't read studies.
Right.
I'll ask them. When I first started out early, I contacted Homeland and I said, through the task force and the FBI, they had stuff on their websites. And I said, I'm a researcher. I want to read it. I want to read the methodology. I want to make sure that can be extrapolated. Where'd you get it? FBI said, we got it from Homeland. So I contacted Homeland. They said, we got it from the FBI. There was no study.
Right.
It was just some made up stat that they had on their websites. They ended up taking them down, but a lot of people will do that. So let's talk about missing children. 91 to 95% of missing children in this country are runaways, and well north of 95% of them are back home within a week
Wow.
of running away. Okay? That's
Okay.
first. Second, according to the FBI data, now they did something super sketchy. I don't know why they did it, but I don't like it. They used to put out, so there's a law in this country. If your kid's walking home from school, he's in second grade, he's walking home and he gets snatched, you report that to the local police. They have to report it to the FBI. Okay?
Okay.
Even if the person that picked him up is your neighbor and they drop him off, it still has been reported to the FBI. So every year they put out data. How many kids are missing? How many kids were abducted by non-custodial parent or family member? That's usually about 4% of the missing children. Usually we average about 250 to 300,000 missing children reported to law enforcement every year.
Okay.
Most of those go back home because they're runaways. 4% are like non-custodial parent or a family member abduction. Less
Right.
than one half of 1% is a stranger. Stranger defined as unknown to the child, unknown to the parent.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the FBI used to put out the exact number, and it was never over 75, like in the last 10 years
Wow.
across the entire country.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, these children are not trafficked. I couldn't find a single data point of a child who was trafficked by a stranger.
Interesting.
Depending on the year, over the last 10 years, according to the FBI, 40 to 65% of the kids are raped and murdered.
Wow.
They're not trafficked. Remember, high profit, low risk. You don't need to kidnap kids.
Yeah.
They are super easy to manipulate
Right.
if they've got an issue, especially sexual abuse in their past. But if they have any kind of vulnerability, are they homeless? Are they a runaway? Um, Do they want money?
Right.
Like, do they come from poverty?
Right.
Do they feel misunderstood? Are they drug addicted? Can you get them drug addicted? That's an easy way to control someone.
Right.
There's just so many different vulnerabilities. You don't need to kidnap a kid.
You've given us so much information, and it's so good.
I've done
Um,
conferences where I've talked for 6 straight hours.
okay. Well, yeah, I was like, I'm trying to find a place where I can sit, and I'm like, this is just so I'm gonna have to go back and watch this like 3 times just to get all the stuff
Yeah,
that you've
there's a
given us.
lot. There's a lot's
Um,
happened in the last decade.
yeah, that's so good. Okay.
And
Also, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then like the next time when we speak with you, I mean, we would love to like pick your brain about, you know, how people really can be supportive for the organizations in their community. Like, what can they do? Is it just like looking for, you know, groomers, or just like
Yeah,
being more
so
careful with their food?
yeah. It's
Okay.
just being aware. I train
Yeah.
people on what to look for, red flags, things like that. And then finding out which organizations in your community are helping. Like, we don't get any money from the government. I know it's crass to ask for money, but that's what we need.
Yes.
When women come
This
to
is what we're
us,
trying to solve.
Yeah.
right. When the women come to us, we've had women come to Oasis that cover the whole continuum. We've had a master's degree. She's a nurse. She had some past trauma,
Yeah.
and she started self-medicating, got addicted, fell in with a trafficker, that kind of thing. And then we've had women come to us who were trafficked at 5 by their dad and never went to school, never learned to read or write, never lived in a house with an oven, always lived in a bandos.
Right.
And they come with no shoes. We've had women come with their intestines in a bag on the outside of their body because a John attacked them with a knife and cut
Oh
them
my God.
open. And like, her lungs were pierced, so she had to wait for her lungs to heal before she could have surgery to put her insides back inside.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's not my fear right now for young girls is they're just being misled. They're being told that sex work is empowering, like with
Yes.
OnlyFans.
Yes.
You know what
Yes. Yes.
OnlyFans is, right?
Yes. 100%.
So, do you
Yes.
understand how most people can't make the connection between like stripping or OnlyFans or non-sexual contact jobs in the sex industry and how women end up? And this is how it works. It's super easy. A young girl or a woman can only be at the top of her game so long. Something gives out. Her brain will start kicking in. She'll have to self-medicate, or she'll just age, right? So then
Right.
she's used to getting, let's just say, $5,000 a night, which is good luck with that. But let's just say
Yeah.
that. Then
Right.
she makes that for a year or two, and these women are not good with money. You don't just go from nothing to making $5,000 a night and you're good with money. Maybe one
Right.
in 100, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Because when I meet them, they're all no, they don't have no money, no matter what their job was. So they start there, even in a strip club. I see it. And then when they can't quite make that, they'll wait. Some of them will wait, but some of them need that because they've brought their lifestyle up to that. So they'll
Right.
do other little things. Like, I had one of the strippers that I interviewed for my documentary said, it's just a hand job. Like,
Yeah.
it's just a hand job. It's not a big deal. And it makes up, she said, my baby damage. I used to make this, but then I had my second child. Now I got a little baby damage. I don't get as much, but I make it up, just doing it. That's how it starts. So if you're
Right.
making bank being, you've already crossed the threshold of sex work. You're already in it.
Right.
And
Right.
then
Right.
it's
Right.
easy to rationalize and say, and statistically, you probably may come from a background of it. So it's just a hand job. So what?
Right.
And now
Yeah.
I'm making, and then it just ends up
It's
into more and
going.
more and more things.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
once that actual contact starts, the impact to the brain is much faster, starts
Yeah.
rolling. So then,
Wow.
in the decision making process, everything is impacted, and it's just downhill. It's just downhill from there.
Yeah. I wanted to. We're almost an hour and
I know.
15 minutes
Sorry.
in. No. I love it. It's so good. I would love to, like I said, we'd love to do a part 2 if you would be willing to do this.
Sure.
But I kind of want to end on on hope. We always want to end on hope.
Yep.
You did bring up the story about your Filipino friend, the miraculous story. I don't know if that's like a story of hope, but is there something that you like, a story of where do you see hope in all of this chaos and this madness?
Where do I see hope? Okay, so I think the hope is in the grace that we can give.
That's good.
Every 3 to 4 years, there's a turnover in Ohio, in my area, of people who are involved. The same personalities come, but the old ones leave. And they leave because they come to rescue.
Yeah.
They come to love on, which is great. We need that. But it doesn't fix them. It doesn't do what they want it to do. And they leave, they go back, all the things.
Right.
So the hope is that there are people out there and organizations out there who say, even if you leave, we're still here for you.
Yeah. So you're saying that the people that are leaving these organizations, they're leaving because of like a burnout, like of feeling like they're not really quote
Yeah,
unquote
yeah,
rescuing the
yeah. They
people
come
because
thinking they're going to save.
right,
Like, we might get a
right,
church that's behind us 100%. Once
right.
a year, they'll take up an offering for us, and they're all in, but they're not. And a couple of the women will volunteer or something, but it doesn't, they don't have the impact.
The
Like, if you go
numbers.
overseas and you're handing
Yes.
food to a
Yes.
child,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the instant gratification of that.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not, by any stretch of the imagination, an instant gratification. For the
Yes.
survivor, it's lifelong. It's a
Yes.
lifelong, journey. And
Yeah.
just, I think the hope is when they realize there's no other shoe. Because they always
Right.
say, their first 2 weeks in the house, they say, I'm just waiting for that other shoe to drop,
Yeah.
because they've been
Yeah.
lied to and exploited their whole life.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they're usually really good manipulators and liars and exploiters, and they think they're getting one over on us. And we just let them think that. We don't care.
Yeah.
It's not about us.
Yeah.
So I think the hope is there are people who understand this is going to be long and dirty and hard, and
Yeah.
we're still doing it
Yeah.
with them. Like,
Yeah.
we can't do the work for you, but we can sure do everything we can to help you do it yourself.
Yeah.
To me, that's hope.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Wow, this has been so amazing. I feel like there's so much that I have learned and so much that I need to learn. And before we end, what can you let everybody know how they can support you, support your Oasis House, the organization that you work for, and also, do you? You said you do trainings. Are these trainings? Do you do you do these trainings for like organizations, for churches? Like,
I've done them. When I first started, I would go if two people were there. Now, of course, because I've been doing it so
yeah,
long, I
yeah.
have pretty substantial sizes, but I can do them on Zoom. I
Okay,
could do them on Zoom. I do.
awesome.
So if I train first responders, anybody who has a licensure, counselors, social workers, nurses, the front end of the training is the same for everyone. This is what the organization is. This is how it works, yada, yada, yada. This is what grooming is. This is what family grooming is. All the things kind of that I covered. But the back end is very specific. First responders are going to see a lot of, the things that they see are going to be much different than a nurse in the ER,
Right, right, right,
because
right,
they're on site. First responders
right,
are on site. And I
right.
do cover labor a little bit. I don't know how California is, but we have an awful Asian massage, illegal massage businesses in Ohio.
Okay,
We have a
yeah,
loophole in
they're
our
out here too.
law. Yeah. And these women are being both labor and sex trafficked. And
Right. Wow.
we're developing a program right now. So how can people help? Well, if you are fluent in Chinese, you can contact me if you're interested.
Yeah.
We're really trying to develop a culturally sensitive program for these ladies. We use the translator on our phone, but we want to make sure that we have the appropriate food in the house,
Right.
that
Right.
they'll eat, so they don't have to come in and eat what we eat,
Right.
unless they want to, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I would love to just talk to, people from different places in China, or,
Yeah.
and of course, people can always financially support us, because our ladies, everything, their schedules are booked. Now they have to Oh, here's something. We have an Amazon list because our ladies, when they come to us, they have to have a job, but a lot of times they don't have a job at first. They don't have an
Right.
ID. They've got a criminal record. We got a lot of hurdles to jump to get them in that first job. But
Right.
we have something called a point store. And what that means is if they're in the house or not all of the women that we serve are need a housing, but they
Right.
come through our programming. But if they're in the house, they got to be up 0900, make their beds. They've got to work. They got to do pro-social communication, make their trauma appointments, go to, do all that. They get points for that. Then every two
Yeah.
weeks, they get to go to the point store and buy things they couldn't otherwise afford: fingernail polish, scarves, shampoo, more luxury shampoos that people donate. And
Yeah.
new items. We don't take anything used because they don't feel as valued. We want them, it's something they've earned. And they say things to us like, this is the first time in my life I've earned something and got to keep it, like, for
Right.
myself.
Right.
So we like have an Amazon wish list because our point store gets low. We have a lot of women go through the point store because there's
Yeah.
so many women
We
in the
actually got to tour the store. It was the little point store you guys have at
Oh,
your
okay.
office.
So you
Yeah.
saw our
Yeah.
little boutique.
Yeah. 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 It
Um,
was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I created that whole program because when I came to Oasis House, Donna, was like, "Will you come on board?"
Right.
And I said this. Actually, after I trained her, I said, "Oh, if you ever need any help, you just."
She was
And
the second one.
she was the second one, and so I volunteered for a year while I was on the task force, and
Wow.
then she came to me and she's like, You cannot. I have to pay you. This is ridiculous. You
Yeah.
put in too many hours." And I was like, "Well, I've never got paid for it." So
Mhm.
the sheriff didn't even pay me. I was on the
Yeah.
task force on stings doing all that. Never got a dime.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Well, awesome. Is there anything else you would like to share? Anything that maybe I missed? Something that like something you in your heart you need to share that you kind of want to talk about before we go?
mm, I'd say if you feel pulled in this direction,
Yeah.
um, come on. But
Let's
no,
go.
but come be realistic.
Yeah.
Be realistic.
Yeah.
And don't come thinking about how good it's going to make you feel, because it's not going to
Right.
make you. Survivors don't make you feel good
Yeah.
ever,
Wow. That's good.
rarely.
I love
Um,
it.
but we will hear one day, well done, well
Yes.
done.
Good. Yes. 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 Yes.
So if you
So
feel
good.
called, come on.
That's I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, Tanya, this has been, like I said, this has been amazing for me. This is actually a little overwhelming in the sense of just like so much knowledge and things that I need to chew on and think about. And even as like I said, my wife was here, she was listening and talk with the team. And I would love to have a conversation with you offline. Maybe if you'd be gracious enough to have a training for us. I don't know. So I would talk to my
Sure.
team.
Yeah. I
But
mean, if they're interested, don't force them.
no, 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 no. They trust me. I think it's good. But what I love is that we get to support. Like this is what we want to do. We want to support you. We love to be able to say whatever you can dream of. What is it? Because we want to be able to give that to you. And so
There is
that's
something I want to tell you real quick.
please do.
Okay.
Okay,
So I'm going to put on my prophecy hat here. No, I don't believe
let's
in all
go.
that, but I'm just telling you.
No,
So
no, come on.
here's something I think is going to blow up in the next couple years, and we're going to need people immediately to stand
Yes,
up and
please tell me.
address it.
Yeah.
Okay. We work with crisis pregnancy centers because a lot of times traffickers don't just see the victim as a way to make a way to make money is sex. They have them take out student loans. They make them work 9 to 5 jobs. I mean, there's lots of different ways that they can bring in income besides just having dates. And
Okay.
so a lot of times in Ohio, they'll allow them to have a child because then their EBT, I think they're called Cali cards out in California, but their
Right.
food stamps, it
Yeah,
goes up.
EBT out here too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So EBT. So then the trafficker uses those to traffic in other things like drugs. He'll do it for cash,
Wow.
whatever.
Okay.
So
Cool.
we work with a lot of, but he won't take them to the hospital because hospitals have been trained, especially in our area, mostly by me, to recognize and respond
Yeah.
to potential trafficking victims. So they go to crisis pregnancy centers where they get all the services for free, the ultrasound, all of that. Here's something we're starting to see: young girls come in foreign nationals, young foreign nationals, and all they have for ID is a piece of paper from Health and Human Services from the feds.
Okay.
We had so like one presented, and they said the thing said she was 18. I'm like,
Right.
You're not 18. Like,
Right.
you're not 18. And she said, whatever age you tell them at the border, that's what they put on there.
Right.
Anyway, she and her sister, who was like 12, were sent to an address in Cincinnati. Her sister was sent for foster care to an address in Cincinnati with like 40 other kids, 1-bedroom apartment that's an abandoned building. Nobody lives there.
Wow.
She's in Dayton being pimped out. Both these sisters, one's pregnant now. Okay. These kids, they were Catholic. So, they weren't going to have an abortion.
Right.
But so the conversation worked like this. There's a bunch of kids. We know a bunch of kids who were supposed to be in Cincinnati, and now they're not. This trafficker went down, picked her up. So she's been pimped out in Dayton with her sister. These kids are all over the country, and they're unaccounted for. You're going to start seeing them in places like homeless shelters, and just think about, you're just going to start seeing them. You'll see them on the street in crisis pregnancy centers. We've got an epidemic of foreign national kids, young people in this country that only have that piece of paper. Nobody's tracking them, and nobody knows where they are.
Right.
So we got to help those kids.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What does that look like? What does help?
But here's the thing, and I don't want to talk out of school, but I'm just going to say that when it was reported to law enforcement, they were told, you can't touch them. It says she's 18. You can't touch her. You can't touch her. And she even admitted she wasn't 18 to the girl doing the ultrasound. So they're going to start showing up at places where they can get services. I know in my area, that's crisis pregnancy centers, that's food pantries, that's all. It's going to be an explosion. You mark my words. In the next couple years, you're going to start hearing about all these kids.
Yes, that makes 100%. It makes sense. I hear that, and I agree. I think you're right, and I thank you for that, because I think we can start getting creative now and figuring out how we can help them. Because I mean, I wouldn't even imagine. I can't even imagine. Yeah, the amount of work you'd have to do to do something like, because you don't even know where they're coming from. You have no history on them. We don't know, so that's
you have to start by educating the people that they're most likely to reach out to for free services,
right,
and start talking to them. But if law enforcement's not going to get involved,
right,
then we do it without them.
Right.
We do it without them.
The church can stand up, or
Yeah, because the church is partly responsible.
Yeah.
Because they said, "Oh, send them here." The archdiocese is like, "Oh, send them," and but nobody's tracking them.
Right.
And they're starting. It's a trickle right now. I'm starting to hear it from this crisis pregnancy center, this this runaway shelter. I'm starting to hear it. It's just starting to come, and I'm sounding the alarm in my community. Hey, we got to get ready for this. We got to get ready for this. Nobody even speaks a foreign language at some of our runaway shelter. We got to get ready. We got to get ready. Unless people are very money centered. So they're just like, well, when that happens, the government will have to get grants, and then they get grants, and
right.
No. No.
Well, again, thank you so much, Tonya. Like I said, if you're willing to do a part 2, I would love to do a part 2 with you. And I'm excited to have that part 2. I hope we're going to be coming out there at some point again, once our house is done that we bought. And if you're in town, we would love to come and take you to dinner. And
that's hit and miss. I'm not. If it's any close to cold weather, I am not there.
Make sure to come down during the summer then.
Yeah. Then for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, and
thank you for doing this.
Yeah, and we will again continue the conversation, and I'm excited to hear the things that are coming out of Oasis House in Dayton.
Yep.
Thank you again.
Thank you for supporting us. All right. Have a great night. Tell your wife goodbye.
Have a good one.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.